Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Morning, Pumi. I'm well, and you?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good.
So I'm glad we're finally able to do this. We've been like threatening each other for a couple of weeks now, um, but it's finally happening. Thanks for joining me, and for anybody that is listening or watching this. I've got Kevin. We've got a few conversations that we're going to be having today. And if you like our channel, please subscribe, like, share. I think it's always great conversations that we have. And Kevin, in this platform, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Pumi. Yeah, guys, my name is Kevin Britz. I run a company called Leadership by Design, where we specifically, where I specifically work as a coach, and have done so for the last 15 years. And also facilitate leadership programs and online leadership programs, but also design a lot of training. Recently been appointed to the head of coaching for careerskitchen.com. So that's a new feather in my cap, which I'm really excited to be sharing and being part of. And then hosted the Lunchtime series, where we add value to people's lives. And that happens on ebuzradio.com. Yeah, so it's a mouthful, but I get to do a lot of things that I love doing.
That's fascinating. You know, you're the first person who's introduced themselves with their surname. Everybody just says, "Hi, I'm Kevin," or "Hi, I'm Pume," and they don't put their surname. Anyway, I just noticed. But anyway, I'm not sure if it means anything.
Yeah, but I don't know how many Kevins you know, right? So you're gonna make sure.
And I think I usually do put my surname when I introduce myself. But yeah, I always just notice somebody will say, "Hi, I'm Pume," and that's it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so today, Kevin, we are talking around setting boundaries, mainly with the focus of setting boundaries in the workplace. So I found in the past few years, people are really talking about looking after yourself, about being resilient. And one of the elements that you can do that is actually setting boundaries around your life as well as around mainly in the workplace. So speak to me, break it down for me. What do we mean by setting boundaries? What does that mean?
Well, boundaries is what's interesting is it's we often, when we speak about boundaries, people often have the misconception that it's something that I have to physically do, and boundaries don't necessarily have to be that. But it's boundaries are more of a mental, emotional, and sometimes physical position that you take with people, in how people treat you, how people behave around you. And expectations that you can set up for your environment. And it really lends itself to self-care and self-importance, self-worth, because we often, when we don't check these things and we don't check how we're doing from an emotional perspective, we very often have people take advantage of your boundaries. So, currently in the world, it's a major conversation. And if we don't actively get involved with what boundaries mean to me and what my expectation is of someone, I very often find myself heading towards an environment that I don't want to be in, or that's debilitating for me. That I start avoiding, that starts affecting my behavior and my mood and my, and that purely based on the fact that, well, you have no boundaries in place. In terms of children, if we look at children, children need boundaries, right? You give a child the boundary of where they're allowed to play in, and it really contains the behavior within that space. When you just let children rampantly run around and run free, they kind of drive you crazy, right? So as humans, we instinctively need a bit of boundaries and rules and expectations set up for ourselves, because it will give us more framework on how to be and what to expect and what to allow within this environment.
Okay, cool. But how would you do this? So why is it important? And I think you touch a little bit on that, but can you just expand? Why is it important that anybody must set up these boundaries? And is it necessary when you set them up that you communicate them, or how does that work?
So for me, if we look at, in terms of work environment, let's start there. Very often we, as an employer, as the employer of that environment, if I don't clearly communicate the boundary for my teams, for my work environment, we'll often end up having behavior and results that you may unanticipate. And that's what you want to try and avoid within a work environment, because when you haven't set up the boundaries and clearly defined what the expectations are around your team, how it looks, what it behaves like, when it's sharing information, what it sounds like, and really start defining the behavior of a team, people will generally want to push a boundary. It's an instinctive thing to see, well, how far can we get away with this? And as human beings, we're curious by nature, so if I don't know what the boundary is, I will absolutely, most definitely want to go and find out, right? And that also leads us to relationships. We look at relationships and boundaries in relationships. So whether that be with a colleague, whether that be with your partner, whether that be with your children, in relationships itself, boundaries very specifically lend itself to the other person understanding what's okay and what's not okay. And we often find that from a coaching perspective, and I'm sure you've come across this often, from a coaching perspective, because of my self-worth or because of my limiting belief that I hold for something that's happened to me way back when, I don't generally, I might not be able to articulate something to someone. And that person comes into my life or into my world and kind of just behaves and does what they do. And because I don't know how to articulate it because of this moment or the situation or this trauma or this past event, I suddenly find myself in a situation. It's like, oh, I know I don't like you because, this. And then because we can't articulate the boundary or that expectation of the moment, you'll find that people don't want to be in a relationship anymore. And no, it's because you're always doing this and you're always doing this. And the other person will go, well, what are you talking about? Like, why is this? So in relationships, it's really important for us to be able to set up a boundary and really, and also, a lot of people want to feel safe when they do this, because sometimes they feel that their boundary may be infringing or their boundary might be unexplainable, right? Or to some versions of a story, it might seem that it's illogical. You're like, well, why? That's just silly, right? So you kind of go, oh, I don't want to share this boundary with you because I'm not sure how you're going to take this, right? But cultivating a safe space and an opportunity to be vulnerable with someone, specifically in a relationship, really lends itself to enable a conversation around boundaries. And I think, please, if you want to add, please go right ahead.
No. I was agreeing with you. It makes sense. And in a couple of weeks, I was talking about cultivating relationships. And it really makes sense that in there, if you don't speak out, if you don't communicate what's working for you and what triggers you and those type of things, then things can go pear-shaped very easy.
Yeah. And also to add to this, very often we think we have to apologize for the boundary, right? And when you set up your boundary for the environment that you're choosing. So whether it's in a relationship, whether it's with your work colleague, whether it's with your boss, whether it's with your child, we shouldn't negate the importance of the boundary, and we shouldn't have to apologize. It's my boundary because this is where I'm okay with myself and with you in this space with me. We look at a work environment. Employees often feel that, if someone phones them or sends them a message after 5 o'clock, they just have to do this. They just have to answer the phone, or they just have to now finish this last email. And there is no have to. The company's it's not going to end if you don't answer this email by tomorrow or later. Setting up time for kind of going, cool, no, this is my boundary. What I'm doing this time is my time. And if you don't take that for you, it starts digging into your self-esteem, your self-worth, your confidence, all of this stuff starts depleting. Based on the fact that you haven't actually set up that boundary. And you shouldn't have to apologize for it because it's your boundary.
Yeah, but what happens in company environments where there's always just an expectation and it's become a culture? It's not like somebody, like your contract says 8 to 5, but there's that expectation that even after hours, you just need to be available, if you're needed. And so what happens in those circumstances when it's really not working for you? How do you handle that?
I think a lot of people, I think it still boils down to communication. I think that we live in a world where we make great assumptions about situations, just purely based on the fact that it's easier to avoid it rather than to talk about it. And I think, when we establish more conversation around, especially now with COVID that's happened, work structures that have changed, expectations and people being home, and there's so much that's added to this conversation suddenly. I think the key entry point would to set up more conversations around the specifics of something. If it is the specifics of this project, you really have to go, okay, cool, tell me what is needed, when is it needed by, how many hours would that be, and have that conversation so that not only do you set up the expectation for yourself, but the person actually speaking to is also hearing the expectation that they're sharing about it, right? So they're almost having a brain moment for both of you to kind of go, okay, we've had a good conversation about this project. You've set it up in a way that is allowing me to say, okay, cool, now you've given me the expectation. You're also saying this is the expectation. And there's sort of a middle ground that you can meet to it, right? And then we can also be accountable to it. But when we don't have the conversation, we kind of arrive at and going, well, why hasn't this been done yet? It's just like you were said that it was going to be this week. And you're going, okay, but it's only Thursday. Like
it's still Friday, another day this week.
So that's why, and people, you see this all the time. I see this all the time. Do a lot of training, a lot of coaching. And you see, we make generalizations, right? In our, it's just a brain way of dealing with information. We use words like every time, all the time, those people, then, how, I can't think of an example now with the weeks though, but we use generalized words in our vocabulary to give an idea of a thing. And if we're not aware of it, I've just informed you that, it's some kind of vague answer that I'm giving you. So if I don't give it to you and say, okay, no, it's the 24th of March at 9 o'clock, like you can assume, well, it's any between now and the 24th, it will be some time. And you kind of thinking, okay, well, this has happened. This has not happened yet. Why is it not happening? So then you get angsty and I get like all shitty for a second, or sorry for swearing, but like, and that's the thing. We as humans need to have effective communication when we actually communicate, right? And people will often say, you know, I'm a very good listener. And then you would go through one conversation and say, okay, cool, tell me what you heard. And then they repeat half of the stuff. And you kind of go, okay, well, you're not an effective listener. You're just saying that because you think, what, you know, like you're not actually, and that's the thing we need to be aware of, you know.
Yeah.
We often, boundaries, as much as we don't want boundaries to be crossed, we also have to have the ability to create a boundary, you know. And that doesn't mean you have to put up a physical wall or have a serious, nasty conversation. It could be a comfortable kind of conversation and say, hey, can we grab a cup of coffee? Because I want to set the expectation so you know what I'm thinking and then I know what you're thinking. And that way, you know, we can both meet the deadline. We can both know that we're not going to let each other down, blah, blah, blah. And that way, quick and easy conversation, you know, it doesn't have to be a difficult one, but it is your responsibility.
But I think, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, the minute you talk about boundaries, people's brain go into something bad. You like, and it's not usually seen as, I'm just for us to understand each other, where we're both coming from, and this is my expectation, and this is what I'm willing to give. And once you cross this line, this makes me uncomfortable, or this is unacceptable to me, that type of stuff. There's always the thought of, it's bad, it's negative, it's, you know what I mean? And how do we then take it to a space where it's not about bad stuff, it's just about how I'm feeling and you hearing where I'm coming from?
So I always think of context, you know, in context to what it is, in context to the situation, the person you're speaking to, the subject matter. Like, consider what all those things are, because that would give you also indication of, maybe if it is a serious conversation, maybe it's a formal email that you kind of go, okay, cool, this is something big. Can we have a serious sit down about it? If it's a casual work environment and just something that's been difficult in the last couple of weeks, and you're starting to notice someone struggling, then sort of sit down with them and have a cup of coffee and see if everything's okay, right? And say, okay, cool, because I'm noticing you're struggling with this, and I just want to know if you're not meeting the requirements. Like, is there something I can help you with? And also, you know, if it's in a personal capacity, I often suggest to people to say, I need to speak to you in a safe space. And when you preface that with anyone, the other person's going, oh, okay, I need to be aware that this conversation might be something I don't like, or this conversation might be an unusual conversation. You know, I've also shared that with my daughter, you know, with anything that I've ever done that she doesn't like, or she's too scared to mention to me, she'll say, Dad, I need to speak to you in a safe space. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's, then I literally go and sit down and I make myself smaller or the same size as her, because she's 12. So I'll like really go down to that level. And I'm like, okay, cool. Whatever you want to say it. And I have no response. I don't have any kind of feedback. I literally just listen. And I kind of go, okay, cool. And I think that's what people should start aiming at doing, is really consider the context of what the situation is, the environment. And also, you know, if it's your boss, part of that is, you know, I think we often find that if it's my boss and my boss has this expectation, and I can go, if I actually start setting that boundary with him, he also can see that, or her for that matter, can also see that, oh, this person is giving me some more insight about them. They may not respond well to it, but at least you have cultivated the confidence and the importance of your own self-worth to look after you, to say, for me to be able to do this, for me to be able to show up for you, I need X, Y, and Z. Like, is that okay? And how that person takes it, you're not responsible for someone's behavior. But then you also know, okay, cool, this is completely out of whack. This is not okay. And then from that, you can have better, decisive, constructive decision-making processes.
Yeah, because what happens if you're telling your boss and you're putting boundaries with your boss around, you know what, my time is my time. After 5, please don't contact me, or whichever way you say it, and they don't receive that well. Like, what do you do then?
In NLP, we and that's for those who don't know, it's Neuro Linguistics and neuroscience. And if you look at neurology and how people's neurology behave, we have a presupposition that presupposes that if there's a sign of resistance, there is a lack of rapport. And you're kind of going, yo, that's a difficult kind of pill to swallow, because now, like, I need to really get on this person's good side to be able to just have a conversation. And the fact of the matter is, yes, you have to, right? So, I currently working with large groups of people. We're doing a whole big project for the Western Cape government and dealing with teachers. And, when you're in front of that environment and you're doing training with them, and invariably there'll be someone who kind of doesn't want to do it or has a lot of resistance. As the person wanting to create the rapport, wanting to create a moment of conversation, you have to be on, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to be agile, almost like you would think of a cat, agile in your approach. So you got like, okay, cool, that's not working. What about this? What about this? What about this? It's like, okay, cool, let me pay more attention. Let me really understand and say it. And then again, it comes back to communication. Have conversations often, right? And clarity, and also tell people who you are, so for me to understand, for me to be sure about how this process runs, let me just make sure this and this and this. And then, or, I would throw it back on my employer as well. I'd say, so I want to speak to you about something that's difficult for me to handle. I'm not sure how to handle it well. I have to fetch my children between 4 and 5. And I'm literally driving in the car or at that time. And then straight from that, we go to eating. And I know that it's important for you to get stuff done very often when you're sending out stuff. Do you have a solution for that? Really turn it back on them and say, you're putting this pressure on me, and I'm giving you my life here. You tell me what to do. So, and I think that's why we often make the mistake of assuming. So I mean, I'm guilty of that. So when I'm working with people, I'm kind of going, hey, dude, let's get this done. It's like I'm messaging you whenever, and like then you get back to me, and it's like a train ride, like we work, we get there, done. And but some people can't do that. Some people work differently. So it's also having and establishing what works for you, what doesn't, and if you as the employee feel that this person keeps doing the same thing, you just approach him and say, you know what, I see that you seem like you have it all together, and you seem like you've got like all the time in the world, and I'm really struggling. This is my time schedule. You've given me the stuff to do. I still have to pick up my child. I still have to make food. My husband's away, or whatever that conversation is.
Yeah.
What would you do in this instance? So, and when you throw it back on them and you just get their insights, because then their brain is on your life for a minute. And they can say, you know what, actually, that's cool. I'll make sure that's X, Y, and Z, right? It's always, I think it's always the case of your boundary doesn't have to be a moment of fighting with someone or establishing your authority. It's not about authority. It's about It's about self-care and self-consideration, or self-worth, and saying, I'm really important. And for me to be okay, for me to be like actioning that number 10, I need to, this is what I need, right? Can you help me figure this out so I can show up at level 10 for you?
And I think that's quite amazing, and we underestimate that element. And what I think I'm getting fascinated, because most of the conversations I've been having, at the core, it's about the communicating, and it's about the listening, hearing what the person is saying and communicating your expectations, literally. And you find that 99% of the time, the person would not have known that if you are not saying it to them. They've made their own assumptions, and hence they are just going on with they're going on as normal, because they don't know any better anyway. And you have not said anything. And it's your responsibility, if there's a sense of discomfort or if you need help or whatever the case is, that you speak up. And that's at the core of the bulk of these things. But I think most people, there's always that element of, but this is work and I'm expected to be delivering. And there's fear of what is the consequence if I don't do this. Hence, they don't even take the time to have the conversation.
Absolutely. As you're speaking, Bhumi, I think for me, I always, share with my coaching clients that, like, what is the North Star for you? What is the North Star for you? And then they'll get to a point and be like, that's what it is, and that's what it is, and that's what it is. And then you kind of go, okay, cool. But now your boss is going to throw this thing at you. And then what we do is we take our eye off the North Star. And you're like, oh, now I've got to do this. Now this is my work. And when you focus on the North Star, you kind of go, well, this is where I'm going. This is like my driving force. This is where I want to be and where I want to get to. Who do I need to show up to be that? How do I do that? Right? And if someone like interjects, do I lose focus of my North Star and then make that my center of gravity? No, you kind of have to keep focused on your North Star and kind of go, oh, cool. Let me just deal with this quickly. And let's try and handle it. Let's communicate. Let's showcase and share and understand and create as much as we can in this environment. But I'm still going to my North Star, right? When I'm focused on the right things as well, and that's what people often get wrong. Your boss does this and he does it often, and suddenly you see another ping on your phone and you're going, oh, now this man, and we start going to that frame, and then we create this monstrosity of this person. And meanwhile, his value system, the way he works, the way he gets things done, his kids are maybe in high school already or university, so he has more time. So he has a whole set of different life values and things and reasons for what he's doing. And I'm measuring my life and my capacity and my environment according to that oak there. And you're kind of going, no, that is the quickest way to just, debilitate yourself. You cannot make the measurement of your success and your ability based on an external reference. I look at the shows that I host. I mean, you've been on my show as well. And when I started those shows, I was like, I panicked as well, like you. And I panicked going, well, what the hell am I going to talk about? I don't know all the answers. I don't know what people want to know. Like, people are going to listen to my show and it's like, oh, what the hell is this oak talking? Like, he's such a fool. Like, that's not my own. And I was like, no, Kevin, get out of your head. Like, what is the aim here? And then I was like, my North Star is I need to add value to people's lives. And I was like, okay. And because I did that in myself was my boundary. That's the boundary. So you can comment on my show. You can come in there and say, oh, God, this, half the time you umming and ahhing, or you're saying the incorrect words, or you can't formulate proper sentences, or whatever you're coming in to do there. But my boundary was set by me, for me, about me. now, I do the show and I kind of go, yeah, sometimes I make really fun. I don't read properly and I have to do it again, or I make mistakes and blah, blah, blah. But it's an internalized boundary. It's an internalized focused moment that I'm having. It's got nothing to do with anybody else.
Exactly.
So,
And as you're speaking, I get reminded, I once had a boss, and this boss would drive me insane because he would literally either just forward an email, blank email with no FYI, at least when you're going to me, FYI, I know just for your information, or please action, I know what you're saying to me. He would just forward an email. And then I would have to make an assumption. And true to God, I will make the wrong assumption all the time. Because it's either the thing that he just forwarded to me, he expected me to action, but I would assume it's my FYI. And the ones that were FYI are the ones that you know what I mean? It was just this nightmare. But Kevin, I went back to him, I don't know how many times, to say, can you just please put a sentence or 3 words, 2 words, please action, FYI, 3 letters, do something. But he was not doing it. And I kept going, I need to create this boundary around this thing because it's driving me insane. So at some point, I literally had to go, every time I got that blank email, I would then go back, calm myself, and be okay with the fact that I needed to ask and go, what would you like me to do?
Yeah.
Action, or was this for my information? Then I'll get a response. But up until I got to that point, I was driving myself insane because I would make the wrong assumption. But I think it was that part of really owning it for myself and going, the boundaries that I had created, it wasn't happening, but now I just needed to find a way that was working for me because this person was not getting it. He was just not getting it. But it just popped in my head.
To add to what you're saying, Bumi, I think we also make the assumption that because he's the leader, because he's the boss, because he's the person in that position, he's supposed to know how to be the most amazing person. We make that assumption. And some people, some bosses are assholes, to put it politely. They're not nice. They just don't know better, right? So you have to, even as an employee, you have to kind of go, damn, if I don't navigate and adjust accordingly to this environment, because I love my job and I love what I do, will it weigh up? Will it weigh up for me to be able to be agile enough to go back to and go, okay, so I saw you sent me 17 emails and 7 of them, I have no idea what's going on. Please quickly, let's go through that. Be able enough to kind of go, some people don't have it down properly, even if they hold a position of power, so, and people will show up for you in a way that is not useful. And you have to kind of go, well, this isn't useful. Like, one of my coaching clients recently said, oh, Kevin, I've been really bad and I haven't done all my homework that you gave me to do. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. How useful do you think that strategy is for you to get to your outcomes? That's the only question I asked, right? And you kind of go, well, is that a useful strategy? Is that useful for me in this point? It's like, for me to get all wrapped up and you go, oh, well, why didn't you do your homework? There's so much that you have to get to do, and kind of go, well, is it useful? It's not useful. So I'm like, you've got to realize it's not a useful strategy or a useful strategy. And I think when it comes to certain types of people that are generally, they don't know how to do it better. And there's that old saying, people do better when they know better. And if they don't know better, they can't do better, So you kind of have to, and when you take that on and you understand it, you kind of, you're not part of it. You get to a point where you're not part of that problem. You kind of just go, well, you don't know better. And systematically, I'm sure if you learn one day, you'll probably know better, but you obviously don't know better.
No, but sometimes, Kevin, it can be draining. With this dude, it was draining. It was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, and you'll probably find if he doesn't pay attention to it, if he doesn't change, if he actually doesn't start noticing that it's an actual problem, that you keep coming back to him about the same stuff, eventually
the reality was like, I wasn't the only one in the team who was complaining about this. A whole lot of us were complaining about this. We would be having side conversations like, oh, today I got 3 blank emails.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah,
and I think those are the lessons that leaders need to learn as well. They it's okay that you have people working for you, but it's not okay to ineffectively communicate yourself, right? So and sometimes when you can, if you have a good enough relationship with someone, it's possible to go to that person and say, listen, I really need you to understand that this is not effectively helping us get to where we want to go here. Stop sending the blank emails. It's not. But if you don't have that kind of relationship, it makes it draining and difficult, and it causes a lot of conflict. That's also where this kind of stuff leads to whether a team will be resilient or not. Whether a team will really show up for that employer. And if there's not enough education happening within that environment, it starts leading to other things. And then suddenly people are more sick and people don't want to come to work. And then you're like, it's easier for you to stay at home than be at work. And every other day you're taking your child to school now. Oh, now it's every Wednesday. And you have to kind of go, what's going on here? There's something not. And sometimes people get it right and some people don't. But from a boundary perspective, again, it's 100% my responsibility to set up my boundaries, even if that means a difficult conversation or a very specific kind of email. I've recently had to set up my boundaries because I've working with an external vendor. They have requirements the whole time, and every other email that they send every other week has an additional line item to it. Oh, and by the way, we must do this as well. We must do this as well. And after 6 months, I was going, no, hang on, guys, can we set up a set of boundaries or a set of expectations on how this is going to play out? There's a whole bunch of stuff that you started mentioning here that was not previously decided on. And I wrote the email really angry, and then left the email for 2 days and came back to it and took out all the emotional bits out of it. And then I was like, okay, cool, sent it. And now we have a better relationship. We have a purely based on the fact that I've pushed back and said, thank you for all the information you're sharing, but we have to create this boundary. We have to have set that expectation. And I did think that they would respond badly to it, but because I'm focused on my North Star, I'm going, no, hang on, this is my boundary. This is what I allow, and this is what I won't allow. And stuff you're doing is something I won't allow. So boundaries are tricky, but they are absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary.
So what is the one last thing that you can want somebody to take out of this conversation?
The one last thing, it's going to sound funny, but it's check just to love yourself, and it's a one-liner, love yourself, and you instinctively go, but what's that got to do with boundaries?
I was about to ask you, what's that got to do with boundaries?
It's so important, like Mpumi, that we often don't realize that if I take myself for granted, people take myself for granted. If I don't show up for myself, people won't show up for me. If I don't take me seriously, people don't take me seriously. So when it comes to loving yourself enough, is really cultivating an internal dialogue of going, well, how do I set me up for success? And if I'm setting myself up for success, what will I allow and what won't I allow? And what does it behave like? And what will those conversations be? And what will I start hearing people say? What will I start seeing on a daily basis when I get out of bed? Like, how do I see that? Based on the fact that, yeah, this is I want to set myself up for success. But for that, I've got to be able to love myself enough to be able to create that. Because if I don't, someone else invariably will create it for me. Right. And if I'm not actively involved with that process, with setting up those boundaries, finding the self-confidence, finding my own resilience, finding the knee-jerk reaction to how I get up in life and do it again tomorrow, if I don't find that as an internally loved place, I'll struggle. You know, because invariably when we don't set boundaries, when people are starting to infringe, you get stuff like burnout that suddenly happens. You're working 20 hours a day. You're going from one meeting to another. You're not getting to everything. You're tired. Straight after burnout, you're like, okay, cool, I need to be off for 6 weeks. And then suddenly they have to put you on tablets. And then because of tablets and you're feeling, oh, no, I'm depressed. I don't feel like this. Yeah. It's such a vicious cycle that happens because I didn't love myself in the first place. You know?
Wow.
Love yourself. Like, love yourself enough to kind of go, this is why. I want to be part and parcel of what I'm putting out into the world. And even it's the smallest thing that I can start actively doing. I always talk about micro habits. What is the micro habits that you can start implementing in your environment to have the massive impact within your environment? Yeah. So do the small thing that you do consistently every single day. Do that. And then when that's down and it's habit and it's in your world and it's the awareness of it, then do the next micro habit. But cultivate your life, your world from an internal perspective, because that way people will pay attention to it. Next time something comes up in a conversation, you'll say, hang on, just so I can clarify, is this what you mean? Is this the expectation? Do you expect me to work after 6 o'clock at night? I'll put up my hand. I'll be able to put my hand up first because I know what reference I'm using. And I know what I'm allowing and won't allow for my world. Yeah. So I would say, love yourself. Love yourself enough to give yourself that chance.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
For anybody who's watching or hearing us, please subscribe, like, share with some of the people that you think might get value out of this. So Kevin, where do people find you? You did mention it a bit earlier, but if you can repeat for us.
Yeah, guys, you can check it out. It's on 3 places. So check out careerskitchen.com. It's all about helping people get to their next best career options. We take through a nice process of helping people get through that. Leadership by Design, specifically around leadership and training, or any coaching that you might need. And then lastly, on ebizradio.com. Happens every day at 12, so you can just tune in. And yeah, there's loads of podcasts you can listen to and loads of information just like this that we share all the time. So thank you. That's where you can go and check it out.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin. I highly appreciate your time, and I think this was an amazing conversation.
Thanks for me. Chat to you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.